Welcome to another FPL video. This is going to be the first time in a long while that we have done one of these rating your teams videos. So if you end up enjoying it, then smash the like button to show your support. And we're going to go into the first team sent in by Julian. There's going to be 10 teams in total. And there is one big finding, which I think is quite obvious anyway for most of you, but it's going to be very clear by the end of this video about the whole FPL community in general as well and the state of our teams. A few notes that I've made about Julian's team is that the attack is very strong. I really like Haaland and Jesus. They are very highly owned, and Jesus has now gone from like 25% all the way up to 40 plus, probably as a result of his brace against Nuremberg. So look, I wouldn't get too carried away, and I still think that Saka around the same price could outscore Jesus with the extra point for scoring as a midfielder and also for the clean sheet. And with Haaland, as much as I like him and I prefer him over Harry Kane, you could go a bit differential, and this goes to anyone who is going for Haaland and might want to go a bit different with their own team. Just go for someone like Harry Kane or Jimmy Vardy even. But I have to say, from the strikers, the premium strikers at the moment, Haaland is my favourite option, but let's see how he acclimatises to the Premier League. A few other things that I've said, and it's going to be very similar for most of the teams reviewed here, is that the defensive line has a very high ceiling. You've got James and Chilwell, who, yes, Chelsea might struggle a little bit defensively with the departures of Christensen, Rudiger, and a few others that are set to depart. But you've also got Koulibaly potentially coming in, and I think Chelsea will improve. And a really big part of their success last season was when the two wing-backs were fully fit, bombing down those wings, getting goals and assists, and I think that will be a very good part of their team. And I like the fact that you've gone for both of them as well, and also Alisson and Trent. So you've gone for that defensive double up for Liverpool. You've also covered the other two top teams in the Premier League with Cancelo for City and Perisic for Spurs. So really good defence. You've got a lot of money invested in there, and one possibility is to actually maybe downgrade one of them if you wish, and you can use the extra money to maybe bolster your midfield, which in my opinion I would try to bolster a little bit. And if you're happy with your defence, I think what I'd really aim to do is to downgrade Darlow to a 4 million goalkeeper like Caballero or Gazzaniga, and then with Bissouma you can downgrade to a 4.5 million midfielder such as Pereira, maybe Colback, and also Josh the Silva. So you've got plenty of options that I think will probably do better than Bissouma and will be even cheaper. And with those two downgrades you would actually generate 1 million more, which might be what you need to upgrade someone like Neto, for example. And with maybe one further downgrade across the rest of your team, maybe in your defence, you could go from Neto all the way to Zaha, Barnes, or even Grealish if you're fancying it. But it's still a really good team, and yes, maybe there's a lot of template picks in there, but for example, Chilwell, his ownership isn't too high. Rashford as well, his ownership is quite low. He started against Liverpool in United's 4-0 win in pre-season, so things are looking good with this team. I like the Pereira pick as well in the midfield, and I'm not a huge fan of going for just 3 midfielders and 2 4.5 millions, but this could be the season where it is going to be the case, and we could actually benefit a lot from that because you can invest that money in your attack and defence as you have done so right here, Julian. But really the main thing you need to do with this team for me is to downgrade Darlow and Bissouma, and with that extra money you can find another upgrade to improve your starting 11. We're now on to Wei Seng's team, and very similar, a very big defence and also a relatively expensive goalkeeper, although slightly cheaper than Alisson in the first team. I actually like that Nick Pope pick. The only thing is that in the opening 6 fixtures it doesn't look too great, but in the long term I really back Newcastle and Nick Pope to get quite a few clean sheets, and in the case of Pope, plenty of saves and bonus points. So I really like that pick actually. Also Trent, Cancelo, Chilwell, Perisic, Tomiyasu, kind of the standard really. Most of us are going for Tomiyasu as a 4.5 million defender. The same goes for Trent, and then one of James or Chilwell. You're going for the kind of lower owned of the two, which is something I've done myself in one of my teams, so I really like that. And Perisic is really highly owned, but at the same time he's probably the best way to cover Spurs' defence. And also with your midfield, I like the fact that you're able to not just have Salah but also have an 8 million midfielder. But maybe this is a bit of an unpopular opinion, and I had Diaz in my own team, but I would definitely consider going for maybe another 8 million midfielder such as Saka, Mason Mount, Maddison. I really like those 3 options as well. And look, Diaz could be the pick of the bunch, but I'm seeing so many teams with Diaz, and I think I would want something a little bit different, and it's something I'm considering for my own team. Then you've got Martin Leonetto, and a lot of these teams that we're going to be covering also have this duo. And look, there's definitely a potential about both of them. They can get some goals and assists. Both of them have a lot of potential to grow in the future, but I'm just not too sure. With Martinelli, I think he's going to be sharing minutes with Smith Rowe. And then with Neto, he only got 1 goal and 1 assist last season. Yes, he was mainly injured, but even when he was fully fit, he got 5 goals and 6 assists in 31 appearances the season before. Now, at 5.5 million, you can't really complain too much, but one thing you could do with this team is potentially downgrade one of Undav or Mitrovic. I'd probably downgrade Mitrovic because Fulham have some very poor fixtures to start the season, and then use that money to upgrade one of those midfielders. And maybe you can go to one of those 7 million midfielders I mentioned for Julian and go to Grealish, Zaha or Barnes. So something to consider. It's still a really solid team. I like the Gazaniga 4 million pick. If Leno doesn't join Fulham, then that could be a really good one at that price point. But ultimately, I would downgrade one of those forwards and use that to bolster your midfield slightly. This team is sent in by Dylan, and no, not myself. What I have to say really right from the bat is that I really like the defensive double-ups for City and Liverpool. Robertson and Trent is one of the best defensive double-ups of all time in Fantasy Premier League. Then you've got Cancelo and Ederson. Really good stuff. James and Perisic. The rest of the team, you could say, apart from Robertson, is quite template. So one thing you could do is maybe go for Chilwell instead of James. Although if you back James to score more points, then don't just go for someone else just for the sake of ownership and differentials. I like the Salah pick, of course, and same with Haaland. You've got 2 captaincy options there. The same goes for most of these teams we're going to cover. I really like Jesus. Good bench as well. Andres Pereira for me is the best 4.5 million midfielder at the moment. You've also got the best 4 million keeper, the best 4.5 million forward arguably, especially if he moves to another Premier League club. And you've also got Jack Colback, who is probably one of the better 4.5 million midfielders as well. Another one you could consider is Josh Da Silva if you maintain these kind of free midfielders and then 2 bench fodder options. However, I'm not a huge fan of these kind of 4.5 million options, having 2 of them anyway, and then having Martinelli and Neto. I think the midfield definitely needs to be improved. That's just kind of my own opinion. You may disagree, and what you can build across the rest of your team with this structure is definitely commendable, and it's a really solid template and foundation. I really like the defensive double up, like I said before. I think the defense in general, the defensive line is fantastic and probably the strongest part of your team. I like the defensive double up as well, but I would consider maybe shifting things up a little bit and upgrading your midfield. We now have Ditya Sen's team, another really solid outing, very similar with Trent and Robertson, but you've also gone for Mendy and Reece James. Now I have to say, I'm not as big of a fan of doubling up on Chelsea's defence with Mendy and James as I would be with James and Chilwell, but it's all a matter of money and the way you want to shift your budget. And I have to say, I really like this kind of midfield structure and also your team structure overall. It's very balanced, and a few other things I've also mentioned is that Grealish could be insane value. Let's see how many minutes he gets, but I really like that pick at 7 million. You've also got good squad depth. Maybe a bit too much, you could say, and we will be getting onto that with other teams as well. But look, it's not the worst thing in the world to have points on your bench because sometimes you need those when someone in your starting 11 misses out. So that's not necessarily a huge issue, but if you want to improve your starting 11, and once again, I'm not a huge fan of having Martinelli and Neto in your midfield, but you're also going to be rotating them with Undav and potentially from time to time Andreas Pereira, depending on how well he does at Fulham. But it's a really solid team, good squad depth. You've got 2 captaincy options there with Salah and Haaland. Apart from Grealish and Robertson, yes, you don't have many differentials, but I have to say, you do have more than a lot of teams that we're going to be covering today and also across the FPL community. So solid stuff. I'm not a huge fan of the defensive double-up of Mendy and James personally, but if Chelsea get that Koulibaly signing over the line, then things could look a lot different when Game Week 1 starts. So really solid stuff. I would just maybe consider downgrading Undav and upgrading one of your midfielders, and it's pretty much something I'm going to be recommending to most people in this video. Marcus has Raya in goal, and it's actually the first team that has appeared in this video that has Raya, which is quite surprising as he's one of the most popular goalkeeper options this season. I like the Chilwell pick over Reece James just for the ownership, but it's really 50-50 between the two in my opinion. And you've got Perisic, Cancelo, Trent. No problems with that at all. Tomiyasu is a 5th defender. Great stuff. I really like the Mount pick. I have to say, the things that stand out to me in this team are having Chilwell and Mason Mount. I really like that. Martinelli and Neto, it's going to be quite a constant theme across the FPL community. I'm not a huge fan of it personally. And you could also consider other options around those price points. So at 6.5 million, you can go for Rashford, who I think could be even better than Martinelli this season. And you've also got Wissa Gordon, Ramsey, and a few others at that 5.5 million price point. So just something to consider. You've gone for Taylor as a forward, which is quite interesting. Normally I would recommend the likes of Archer and Greenwood, but Taylor could be decent and one to keep an eye on. Caballero is probably one of the better 4 million keepers. He's now going to be the third choice for Southampton. They've recently signed a goalkeeper. You can maybe go for Gazzaniga, who has a slightly higher chance of starting games, but at 4 million, you're not really going to expect that too much. So really solid stuff. And not many teams that I've seen so far have the likes of Harry Kane, Jamie Vardy, and maybe Heung-min Son. I think they're definitely going under the radar, especially in the case of the Spurs duo. And if some of you are thinking my team is too template, then really what I'd recommend to you is maybe go from Salah to Son, or find a way to have both of them in and maybe downgrade your attack slightly to bolster your midfield. That's something that can be said for everyone, not just for Marcus's team here on screen. But I have to say, really solid stuff. Just once again, you could consider some alternatives to Martinelli and Leonetto, like Rashford, and some 5.5 million midfielders like Wissa. One of the main things that stands out with Thomas's team is having Illan Meslier, and he's not the only one in this video to have the French goalkeeper, but I like it. Low ownership, 2.7%. My main concern is Leeds' defence. That's really the main issue. But Meslier does have a high ceiling, and if he can get occasional clean sheets, especially with those opening fixtures, Leeds rank third in the Fantasy Football Hub fixture ticker from gimmicks 1 to 10. So really good stuff. Wolves at home to start the season. It's not too shabby. Really kind of template defence. The same can be said for my team and also everyone we have covered in this video. I like the Salah Diaz kind of duo, but I would maybe consider another 8 million midfielder, and the same goes for everyone else. Also Jadon Sancho, who looked very sharp against Liverpool, albeit not their main team in pre-season. Jesus and Haaland seems to be very popular, more popular than I anticipated. Jesus is now at nearly 56% ownership, which is insane. Haaland way over 60%, which is definitely making myself shift towards the likes of Harry Kane and someone else, just to kind of diversify my team a little bit. But really solid stuff. You've got, in my opinion, the best 4.5 million midfielder in Andres Pereira. You've also got one of the best 4.5 million defenders in Tomiyasu. I would maybe consider going for Gazzaniga as your 4 million goalkeeper, but that's not really a main issue. Greenwood's fine. Really good stuff overall. Not a big fan of Neto Martinelli, but maybe the main thing I would say is to go for a differential in your outfield positions, because you have Meslier in goal, but maybe spice things up a little bit with your outfield team. So instead of Diaz, for example, go for James Maddison. If you're not too confident about him, you don't need to make that switch. So only go with what you're comfortable with. But I would recommend, and the same goes to everyone else in this video, to go and spice things up a little bit with some differentials. And I'm probably going to do that with my own team after recording. This is FPL Toe Brian's team, and he's got a triple up in City and Liverpool. Ederson, Cancelo and Haaland, and Robertson, Trent and Salah. Really good stuff. That's probably the main thing I like about this team. It's fantastic. Chilwell as well, with lower ownership than Reece James. Obviously only go for him if you think he's going to do better. Perisic as well is completely fine. Neto Martinelli, at this point I'm probably going to be resigned to saying, well, maybe they are very good picks. And don't get me wrong, they could certainly offer insane value, but you could consider some of the other options we discussed in this video. Rashford would be, in my opinion, the best option, around 6.5 million and under. And also Saka, the first team I've seen with Saka, he could be a great differential over Gabriel Jesus, whose ownership is absolutely crazy right now. And it'll be interesting to see who scores more points by the end of the season. My bet is actually on Saka at the moment, but things can change very easily. And pretty standard stuff with the kind of bench. Greenwood, Andres Pereira, Taylor, who we've seen before as well. And once again with the goalkeepers, you already kind of know my preference there. But I have to say, really solid stuff with the defence. Fantastic with Ederson, Cancelo, Robertson, Trent. That's what really stands out to me. But I would maybe go for another differential in the outfield positions. And personally, I think Kane over Haaland could be the way to go. And look, Kane has that kind of reputation of not doing so well in August typically, but I wouldn't look too much into it. And in game week 1, I think Kane will outscore Haaland. Longer term, that could be a different story because Haaland has better fixtures from game weeks 1 to 10 and also plays in a better team, but never rule out Harry Kane, even in August. And with fixtures like Southampton, who he tends to do very well against, he could be a really good captaincy option even over the likes of Mohamed Salah. We were just speaking about having Harry Kane over Haaland as a differential. And what does Marco do? He does exactly that, which I really like. Also Chilwell with relatively low ownership. The rest are going to be quite highly owned in the grand scheme of things, but it goes for most of our teams and templates. and I would like to see a bit of a shake-up and not so many people going for quite similar teams. And I think one really good way of doing it is to actually downgrade a defender or two, and potentially, look, we all want to have 3 or 4 quite expensive defenders because they offer such insane value, but at the same time I would like to see a bit of a change. Maybe it's not even our fault, it has to be FPL with the pricing. I even said it during the price reveals, the defenders have been priced too cheap, some of the forwards are far too expensive. Just look at Calvert-Lewin, for example, and the midfield is generally fine. But why would you go for some of these midfielders like Rashford at 6.5 million when you can get Robertson at 7 million, who'll probably score even more points, which is kind of the big dilemma we have at the moment in FPL. But hopefully things can shake up a little bit. I have to say, and it goes for every single team we've covered today, really good teams, they're solid. Go with what you think is going to score the most points. I think personally that there might be some better 8 million midfielders than Diaz. I've kind of shifted my opinion about him a little bit. I need to see a bit more consistency in terms of goal output, not just for Liverpool, but also for Colombia before I'm really settled on having him in my team. But really solid stuff overall. I like the Chilwell and James defensive double up, even over the likes of Chilwell and Mendy, for example, just because of the attacking potential, which is insane. And just speaking of attacking potential across the rest of your defence, it's absolutely fantastic with Trent, Cancelo and Perisic. Really what I'd recommend with this team is to maybe spice things up a little bit in a few other areas. But to be fair, this isn't the worst in terms of template and highly owned players that we've covered so far, and also in terms of the FPL community at large. While this may look very similar to a lot of teams that we've covered today, Karaki has kind of distinguished things a little bit by having Meslier, who is 2.7% owned, also Phil Foden, whose ownership is 7.6%, really good stuff, and also Trent and Robertson. How many teams have we seen across not just this video, but also in the FPL community that have that duo in it? It's very hard to fit them in. Well, the answer is not that many, and I've said this before, I actually prefer having Robertson than Diaz. The problem is also the structure and which other defenders you're going to miss out on. For example, Karaki won't be able to have someone like Perisic or Chilwell unless they downgrade someone else like James or Cancelo, but Robertson will kind of take that spot away from it. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because Robertson for me is one of the very best FPL defenders. I like the attack, it's quite template, but who cares at this point? I think all of us are kind of resigned to having some kind of highly owned players, and Neto could be one of the best 5.5 million options. Just consider Wissa and a few others we discussed today. Phil Foden could be great, but another differential from Man City is Riyad Mahrez. Yes, he's competing with Alvarez and maybe Cole Palmer as well, but keep an eye on that spot because Mahrez could potentially be even better value than Phil Foden if he gets those minutes which he craves. But I have to say, really solid stuff and a lot of great teams sent in. Thank you very much to all of you for doing so. The final team to be covered in this video is by the 2000 man, and I really like the defensive double up of Chilwell and James. Raya is probably the best 4.5 million goalkeeper in the game at the moment, hence his ownership. Cancelo, Trent, really good. Martinelli, Neto, Diaz and Salah is probably one of the most popular midfield quartets we've seen. Haaland and Wilson looks really good. Wilson's ownership has actually gone down even more from when I did my first draft video where Wilson was included. His ownership is only 4.4%, so he is kind of my favourite part of this team as well. Tomiyasu there on the bench with Andres Pereira. You've also got Force there as the forward, which is quite interesting. I'm not too sure if you'll get the minutes. If anyone does know, then let me know down in the comment section below. And in terms of the goalkeepers, you already know my feelings on that. But I have to say, it's pretty standard stuff. You know, you've got 2 captaincy options there to alternate between. You've got a solid defence. You've also got a good midfield, despite my kind of vocal opinions about Neto and Martinelli and my concerns. It doesn't mean they're bad and you can still go for them, but I would have some concerns, and maybe there are better alternatives out there that we should be considering, even though they're not that popular. But this has been a blast. Yes, we've kind of been dissecting quite a lot of these teams, which are quite similar problems, similar maybe ways to improve, and also similar strengths. But it does highlight the fact that a lot of our teams are maybe quite similar in the grand scheme of things, and it not just goes down to the people who send in their teams, which obviously, once again, I'm very thankful for, but it just goes for the FPL community at large, and it is a bit of a shame with the pricing. Hopefully it's better next season, but obviously we still need to go into this season, hopefully, and maybe there's going to be more differentials that arise as we go across the season, and things will spice up a little bit more because it makes the game more fun. when we get to UCL Fantasy, if you do play it, you're going to see maybe the big difference in terms of the template, and it's nowhere near as strong in that game as it is in FPL. But thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video or found it useful, smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. Let's get this video to 200 likes. It'd be much appreciated. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and also join the Discord server. The link is in the description below. Also consider joining us on Patreon or as a channel member. All the links are there in the description. There's also the FPL League, which I'd highly encourage you to join. Take care, enjoy the football, as well as the summer break, and I'll see you next time.